sincere condolences on this evening, the commemoration of the martyrdom of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. The schedule for this evening will be as follows. We'll begin with a recitation of the Holy Quran by Brother Munir, followed by a lecture by our esteemed guest speaker, Sayyid Salih Khazwini, followed by a recitation of Nauha by Sayyid Ishmatullah, and then we will conclude with a session of Q&A that will be held exclusively on Zoom. So if you are interested in having the say answer any of your questions, please be aware that that will be only on Zoom. So with that, we welcome Brother Munir with the loudest of salawat in your own homes.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى. وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. لا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله العلي العظيم. دعاء فرج. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. إجماعا صلوات. اللهم صل.
Thank you so much, Brother Moon, for that beautiful recitation. We will now transition to the next portion of tonight's program, which is a lecture by Sayyid Saleh Khazwini. So if everyone could please welcome him with the loudest of your salawats in your own homes. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin by giving you all my sincerest condolences on the martyrdom anniversary of Lady Fatimah alayha salam. Fatimah al-Zahra alayha salam, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the mother of the Imams, Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein. This great and honorable lady was born on the 20th of Jamadi Thani in the 5th year after the Bi'tha of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and she left this life, according to the narration that we are commemorating now, on the 3rd of Jamadi Thani in the 11th year after the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. This means that the life of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam was a very short life. She lived for 18 years. Now, there are some differences on the narrations of her birth. There are some narrations that are accepted by the Sunni school of thought predominantly, which state that Fatima Zahra was born 5 years before the Bi'tha of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. While the Shi'i narrations state that she was born 5 years after the Bi'tha of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So this means that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, she was either 18 years old or 28 years old. However, both of those are very small number, a very young age to live a life. And throughout those years, throughout those very short years, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam became Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen min al-awwaleen wal-akhirin. She became the leader of all of the women of the world and the leader of the women of paradise. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi tells her, Anti Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen. She tells him, Tilka Maryam ibnatu Imran. Isn't it Maryam, the daughter of Imran? Isn't she Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi tells her, Maryam Sayyidatu Nisa'i zamaniha, wa amma anti, فأنت سيدة نساء العالمين من الأولين والآخرين. Maryam was the leader of the women of her time, but you, O Fatima, you are the leader, you are a role model, you are the mistress of the women of all times, from the beginning to the end. My dear brothers and sisters, the question is, what were the many roles of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam? And how did she manage to become so great? How did she manage to become the greatest lady to ever step foot on this earth and the greatest lady in paradise? Fatima Zahra alayhi salam is revered and respected not only because she is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. She is not respected because she is the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen. She is not respected because she is the mother of the Imams, although those are very important tasks that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam took. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam is revered and honored because of who she was, because of her role, because of her personality, because of her struggles, because of her ibadah, because in every role that she was, she became the greatest. She reached her highest potential in all of the roles that were given to her, whether it was the roles that society give to a typical lady. What are the roles of women? A lady, she is either a daughter, or she is a wife, or she is a mother. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, she became the greatest in these three roles, although she was not limited to these three roles. You know, for millennia, for centuries, ever since we know of history, any civilization that you study, you see that women in those civilizations were oppressed. Women were looked down upon. It was dictated what roles women should have and what roles women should not have. And most of the time, they received the bad end of the deal. Whether it was pre-Islamic Arabia, or whether it was in China, or whether it was in the Roman Empire, whether it was the Persian Empire, whether it was India, any society, any civilization, you see that women were disrespected. Women were not given the honor and respect that they deserved. And their roles were dictated by communities, by cultures, by norms, by practices. They were telling her, limiting her role and dictating to her how she should be. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, she was also born in a society that is misogynistic. She was born in a society that had hatred for women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran, وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظل وجهه مسودا وهو كظيم يتوارى من القوم من سوء ما بشر به أيمسكه على هون أم يدسه بالتراب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes when one of those men in pre-Islamic times, when they were told that your wife gave birth to a girl, what would they do? وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا. His face would turn black. He would be so angry. ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. And he would be angry and sad. يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ. He would hide himself away from people. يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ. Because of the bad news, the supposed bad news that he received. أَيَمْسِكْهُ عَلَى هُونٍ. Should he hold her with shame, or يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ, or should he bury her in the soil? One of the practices of pre-Islamic Arabia is burying the daughters alive, because they were ashamed, because they were living in a misogynistic culture, a misogynistic society. Islam came and it changed all of that. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he was given a daughter. Rasulullah had daughters. His sons, they would not survive. Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi changed society not only through words, but through action. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was the gift of Allah to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And through the way Rasulullah dealt with Fatima, and the way he raised her, and the way he treated her, he changed the customs and the norms in society. And also Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, in the way she took on the challenges of the time, the challenges of the roles that were given to her, she also showed the whole society and showed the world that you could be the greatest if you're a daughter. You can be the greatest as a wife. You can be the greatest as a mother. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was not limited to these three roles. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam was a philanthropist. She was a model of giving, a model of charity. Zahra alayhi salam, the Quran talks about the giving of the Ahl al-Bayt. ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They give, even if that was to take from themselves. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was an educator, a teacher in her community, in her society. Women would come, people would come. Salman, he would come and he would ask questions to Fatima alayhi salam, and Fatima al-Zahra would answer. A lady comes, she asks, and then she kept not understanding, and she would ask again, and a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time. Usually if you have a teacher, someone asks them once, twice, three times, they say, okay, that's it. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was patient. And she kept answering the lady, and answering her, until the lady clearly understood the concept and understood the matter. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, her role, seeker of justice, seeker of social justice, a defender of the truth. She did not limit herself, and she did not allow the society and the norms of the cultures and the communities to suppress her voice. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she had a very important role after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. In fact, she was the head of the opposition. She was the face of the opposition. This is why they saw that the only way to carry out their coup and the only way to continue with the usurpation of the caliphate was to silence Fatima. And they did silence Fatima alayhi salam. They silenced her between the door and the wall. They silenced her when they took fadak from her. They silenced her when they told her to stop crying for her father Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. But Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she remained speaking truth to power. She remained holding on to values and principles. And she tells us until today, Fatima al-Zahra is a voice of protest. even if that voice is a silent voice. Even if that voice is a silent one, voice of protest. How so? When Fatima al-Zahra asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to hide her grave. Why is the grave of Fatima today hidden? Why is it when you go to Medina, you find the graves of this person and this person and that person, but you don't find the grave of the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Because Fatima al-Zahra, she chose to have her silence be a form of protest against that establishment. And until today, 1400 years later, Fatima al-Zahra, her protest is loud and clear for the whole world to see and hear. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she became the greatest as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a philanthropist, as a seeker of social justice, as a teacher, as anything, as a community member. She was the greatest. Today, my dear brothers and sisters, one of the diseases we have in our societies, in our communities, is that some, not in the name of Islam, in the name of their own arrogance and pride, in the name of their own cultures, they try to minimize the role of those who are marginalized, especially, for example, women. They try to dictate to them how they should be and what they should be. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she reached the ultimate height, at the same time preserving her modesty, preserving her chastity, preserving her hijab. She did not allow that to come in the way of her speaking out against the injustice of her time. Let us analyze some of the roles of Fatima alayhi salam. First, she was a daughter. She was a daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Her father was Rasulullah, a man who was sent as a mercy to all of mankind. And Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she lost her mother at a young age. At a young age, she became an orphan. She lost her mother Khadija. And Rasulullah also lost Khadija. Zahra alayhi salam, she took up the task of defending Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She took up the task of standing there and healing the wounds of Father Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The same job that Khadija had. Rasulullah, some days he would come home bleeding from head to toe, and it was Fatima who was waiting for her father, just as a mother waits for her own son or daughter. And then she would heal the wounds of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the battle of Uhud, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was injured, Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam came in the battlefield and she began to heal the wounds of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. She took care of Rasulullah in such a way where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, Fatima ummu abiha. Fatima is the mother of her father. And also keep in mind that Rasulullah, he himself was an orphan. Rasulullah, he was born and his father had already passed away, and his mother died when Rasulullah was only 6 years old. So Rasulullah needed and he wanted that love and that affection, and he received that love from his daughter Fatima alayhi salam. So he called her Fatima ummu abiha. She became a mother, and she took up on the task of a mother before she actually became a mother. Later on, she moved on to the role of a wife, a young daughter in the house of her parents. She moves on to become a wife, and she became the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Many of the multi-millionaire Sahabas, some of them were very rich, some of them were extremely wealthy, some of them had the status. They came and they asked for Fatima's hand in marriage. Rasulullah rejected. Rasulullah rejected because Rasulullah wanted to find a compatible partner for Fatima alayhi salam. Today, my dear brothers and sisters, one of the keys to a happy family, to a happy marriage, is compatibility. It's very unfortunate that some, they marry themselves or they find someone who is only attractive. They only focus on the looks. or someone who has money, someone who has wealth, someone who drives this type of car and has this type of house and has this type of job, thinking that these are things that bring happiness. There were men who were very rich, who were extremely wealthy. They came to ask for Fatima's hand in marriage, but Rasulullah rejected them. Because money doesn't bring happiness to a family. Giving your daughter or marrying someone who has this type of career or that type of career, these are not things that bring happiness. Compatibility, it's the iman, it's the taqwa, it's the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will make couples and the spouses respect one another. It's very unfortunate in some cultures. They say, no, I'm not going to give my daughter except to, for example, a doctor. If a doctor comes and proposes to my daughter, that's when I'm going to give my daughter. Or someone who's extremely rich. They ask the person, how many digits do you have in your bank account? The young man comes to propose and they tell him, okay, tell us how much money do you have? What kind of a car do you drive? These are things. But these are things that don't bring happiness, my dear brothers and sisters. These are things that could actually come in the way of a happy marriage. Zahra alayhi salam, she teaches us that happiness comes from simplicity. After all of the Sahaba, after many of the Sahaba, they came and they proposed, then there was no one else left. So they tell Ali ibn Abi Talib, we all went and proposed. Go and ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He goes and he asks Rasulullah, and he's embarrassed. He has nothing. Rasulullah is the one who raised him. Amir al-Mu'mineen was always, from day one, he was with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He goes and he asks, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he goes to Fatima and he asks her. Today, there are some cultures, the father, he comes and he says, yes, I'm going to marry my daughter to whoever I want, and I'm going to make her divorce, get married, whatever, without her having to say. Islamic, my dear brothers and sisters. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he's the most complete person. And he knows that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the best person for Fatima, but he goes and he asks her. Once he asks her, he sees that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam is okay with marrying Amir al-Mu'mineen. She agrees. So then he comes to him and he tells him, oh Ali, what dowry will you give Fatima? You have to give her dowry. The dowry represents and is symbolic gesture that the husband is the provider for the family. So Amir al-Mu'mineen tells Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, you know what I have. He tells him, what do you have? What do you own right now? Amir al-Mu'mineen, he had left Mecca. He had nothing. He left and he migrated with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So he tells Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, I have a sword. And I have a nadih, which is a mule, an animal that delivers water from point A to point B. And third, I have a shield that I use in the battle. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi tells him, oh Ali, as for the sword, Islam is in need of your sword, so keep your sword. And as for the nadih, the mule, you will need it to provide for your family. You will need it to work and to provide for your family. Because in Islam, the man has to go out and work. Now, there's nothing wrong with women working, but it's the duty of the man, the duty of the husband to go out and work. Sit at home and expect unemployment benefits and a surplus and the stimulus and say, I don't need to work. No, in Islam, you have to work. And Rasulullah tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, keep the mule because you need to work. And Amir al-Mu'mineen used to work. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he planted hundreds or thousands of trees and dug hundreds of wells in the Arabian Peninsula. He used to work. He tells them, as for your armor, go ahead and sell it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he sells the armor for 500 dirham. 500 dirham is equivalent to $1,000 today. This was the mahar, the dowry of Fatima alayhi salam. The dowry of Fatima Zahra was something equivalent to around $1,000 today. And what did they use it for? They used it to furnish the house. They used it to get them a place to feed people on the wedding. This was what it was used. And at the end, this was a happy, successful marriage. A marriage that produced the progeny of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All of the Sayyids who are the children of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, all of them, they go back to the marriage of Imam Ali and Fatima. No one else. No one could say, I am from the children of Rasulullah, and they were not from the marriage of Imam Ali and Fatima. Rasulullah had many wives, but none of his wives were children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for the Kawthar, إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرَ. The Kawthar is Fatima alayhi salam. She is the source of the khayr al-kathir, of the blessings and the progeny of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That marriage became a fruitful marriage. That marriage became a happy marriage because it was built upon simplicity. It was built upon a non-materialistic culture. It was built upon satisfaction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the things that bring happiness, my dear brothers and sisters. Today, how many marriages are on the verge of divorce? How many marriages are falling apart? How many marriages are in danger? The main reason is because there's no simplicity. There's no contentment. Everyone wants and wants and wants. And these wants, you end up having a huge mansion. You end up having the fastest cars. You have everything, still not happy. You're still not satisfied with one another. Why? Because happiness is a feeling. It's in the heart. And who is the one who controls the heart? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could give you happiness in a simple life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you happiness in a bigger house. But the most important thing is that you have to be God conscious. You have to have a life that is God-centric. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be the center of that relationship. This is why that marriage of Imam Ali and Fatima, it was a marriage that revolved upon satisfying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. This was the marriage of Imam Ali and Fatima. A marriage that focused on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Days after the marriage, Rasulullah sees Fatima. He tells her, what kind of a husband is Ali? She tells him, نعم العون على طاعة الله. Ali is the best partner in getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're looking for a spouse, when you're looking for a husband or a wife, let that be the first thing you're looking for. A partner that will help you, that will give you the energy, that will give you the motivation to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first thing you should look for. Because what's the point of having someone who's extremely rich or someone who's extremely beautiful, but they take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This short life you live, eventually you separate from the money, you separate from the wealth, you separate from the looks, and then you have lost your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fatima al-Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen, their relationship was one that was based upon getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he was very attached to Fatima alayhi salam. Because she and him, they lived a marriage of happiness. Despite all of the turbulence of the time, despite all of the difficulties and challenges that the Muslims and Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra were facing, they lived happy. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, anytime I go to the house, I would forget all of my problems. I would forget all of my anxiety as soon as I see Fatima alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq was asked by one of his companions, why was Fatima named Fatima? لأنها كانت تزهر لأمير المؤمنين. Because she used to bloom and illuminate for Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, many years later, he says, I would always forget all of my problems when I look at Fatima. in the Battle of Siffin, 30 years after the martyrdom of Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam. The Battle of Siffin, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's fighting against Muawiyah. And on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you have Ammar, you have the Tayyihan, the Shahadatain, Ibn al-Tayyihan, and you have some of those old Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ammar was in his 90s. These men were old men. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells them, dye your beard. He tells them, go and dye your beard, so that the enemy, when they see an old man, they're not going to feel stronger, and they're not going to want to come and attack this person. This was one of the tactics of war. Go and dye your beard so that you look strong. Go and they dye their beard. Then they come and they see Amir al-Mu'mineen in the tent. His beard is gray. His beard had turned fully gray at that time when he was in his 60s. So they tell him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you tell us to dye our beards while your beard is gray. You dye your beard. He tells them, Ana fi huzun. I'm in mourning right now. They tell him, who are you mourning? He says, Huzni ala Zahra. I'm mourning Fatima. They tell him, after 30 years and you're still in the mourning? Yes, how can I forget Fatima alayhi salam? Whenever I would go to her, I would forget all of my problems. I would forget all of the difficulties and challenges I have in life. This is why Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, in her wasiyah, in her will, she says, يَبْنَ الْعَمْ مَا عَهِدْتَنِي كَاذِبَةً وَلَا خَائِنَةً وَلَا خَالَفْتُكَ مُنْذُ عَاشَرْتَنِي. Her last words with Amir al-Mu'mineen. She tells him, oh my husband, I never lied to you. I never betrayed you. I never went against your orders or anything you say. This whole time we were married to one another. You find a marriage where the husband and wife are always truthful with one another. They never betray one another. They never hurt each other's feelings. And they empower one another to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was the marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima. A marriage that was built upon the satisfaction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the trust in God in all matters, in all circumstances, in all difficulties. One day Amir al-Mu'mineen comes to the house and he sees that Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, there's no food in the house. So he tells her, oh Fatima, oh my dear wife, there's nothing in the house. There's no food. She tells him, yes, there's no food. He tells her, why didn't you tell me that I bring something for you to cook? He tells him, when we got married, Rasulullah, my father, told me, your husband Ali is a generous man. If he's able to bring, he will bring himself. And if he's not able to bring something, then don't pressure him and make his life miserable. Put pressure on him. So she says, I know that you would always bring. And when you don't have, you don't bring. So I didn't want to make your life difficult. That's why I didn't tell you. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he left the house. And he goes and he borrows a dirham. Amir al-Mu'mineen was a hard worker. But at that time, life was very difficult. So he goes and he borrows 1 dirham. On his way back to the house, he sees one of his friends, one of the companions of Rasulullah, Al-Miqdad. He tells Al-Miqdad, oh Miqdad, what are you doing? At this time, it was a time that no one is out. Miqdad tells him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I left the house and my children were crying out of hunger. I came to look for something for them so that I could feed them. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he takes that dirham and he gives it to Al-Miqdad. Imagine, he borrowed that dirham for his own family. He gives it to Al-Miqdad. And he says, my family is used to the hunger. My family always gives in the way of Allah. He goes home. Once he enters, he sees Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. She's in the mihrab. She's sitting in the mihrab praying. And next to her, there's a dish. There's a plate of food. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa is standing next to Fatima. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells her, Ya Fatima, oh Fatima, anna laki hada. Where's this from? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he tells him, "Oh Ali, Fatima is not less than Maryam ibn Imran." Zakaria, Prophet Zakaria, he used to enter on Maryam and he used to see that she has food next to her. So he used to tell her, and this is mentioned in the Quran, كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا قالت هو من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. Maryam would tell him, this is from Allah. Allah gives without hisab, without accountability. So Rasulullah, he smiles to Ali ibn Abi Talib and he tells him, "Oh Ali, Fatima is not less than Maryam. Just as Maryam food would be delivered to her from heaven, Fatima as well, because of their patience." Now, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, she moved on to become a mother. And today, one of the most underappreciated, undermined roles is the role of a mother. The role of a mother, motherhood is looked down upon. If you become a mother, you're going to be limited. You're not going to be able to do what you want. You're not going to be able to reach your career, your highest potential. You can't do this and do that. Your body's going to change. There are so many and people saying, no, don't do this and don't do that. And they look down on motherhood. Whereas Islam raises mothers. Islam honors mothers. Islam says heaven is beneath the feet of your mother. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُل لَّهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُل لَّهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُل رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. The Quran teaches us to do dua for our mothers, do dua for our fathers. But today, society looks down on mothers. No, don't. And they come and they say, if you want to be free, you want to do what you want, then go ahead and abort your child, go and do this and do that, and making a mother feel like she's carrying a bomb instead of carrying a baby. That is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Motherhood is a holy and sanctified position, and the mother is the first teacher. And Fatimah al-Zahra alayha salam, she was a mother. Fatimah al-Zahra alayha salam, she was a mother who not only focused on feeding her children. Today, some say, if I'm a father, I'm a mother, all I have to do is feed my children. I make sure they're well fed, they're well clothed, and I make sure they go to a good university and make money. That's not parenthood, my dear brothers and sisters. Being a father, being a mother means that you become the role model for your children. Being a mother means that you are the first teacher of your children. This is why Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, before teaching the strangers, she focused on teaching her own house. She teaches her children the importance of philanthropy. The Ahl al-Bayt, Allah talks about their giving in the Quran. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. She teaches her children the importance, if you can't give, then you pray for others. This is something very important, my dear brothers and sisters. Let us not be selfish when it comes to our dua, when it comes to our prayer. If you pray for someone, it doesn't mean that Allah is not going to accept your prayer for yourself. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, Imam al-Hasan, he says, on her Thursday night, I would see her stand in her mihrab and she would pray until her feet would swell. And then throughout the night, I hear her praying for the neighbors, praying for the neighbors. Those neighbors that did not appreciate Fatima, Fatima was praying for them. And then he says in the morning, I would tell her, Ummah, oh my mother, I see that you were praying for this person and that person and the neighbors, and you did not mention the family. So she tells him, Ya bunay, al-jar, thumma ad-dar. Oh my dear son, we pray for the neighbors and then we pray for ourselves. My dear brothers and sisters, how was it that Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein, They ended up giving everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was because of their mother and their father. Because their mother from day one teaches them to not have that selfishness and to think of others and give others. Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was a teacher. She empowered her children. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, he would come after listening to the sermon of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa in the masjid. He would come to the house and then she would set up a mimbar. She would set up a small chair for him and she would tell him, deliver to me the sermon of Rasulullah. So Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, he would stand and he would deliver the khutbah, the same sermon of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. It is said that one day, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he came and he wanted to be proud of his son. So he was hiding behind the door and he sees Imam al-Hasan delivering the sermon of Rasulullah to Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam. As soon as Amir al-Mu'mineen came, Imam al-Hasan, he went quiet. His mother tells him, read, go ahead, continue. He says, Ummah, qalla bayani, kalla lisani, la'alla sayyidi yar'ani. He was embarrassed of speaking in front of his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, oh my mother, how can I speak when my father Ali is here? How can I speak? And I need the guidance of my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. This was how Fatima alayhi salam nurtured her children to show love for Ali ibn Abi Talib, their Imam. And she also took a stand and she defended Amir al-Mu'mineen, not because he was her husband, but because he was her Imam. Some ask, why was it that Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam was the face of the opposition? Why would Amir al-Mu'mineen allow for Fatima alayhi salam to be by the door and she is the face of the opposition? Amir al-Mu'mineen, the whole issue was about the Imamah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. They tried to kill Amir al-Mu'mineen. They tried to kill Ali ibn Abi Talib. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she saw that if she does not do anything, her husband is going to be killed. Her Imam is going to be killed. And therefore, she was the first to sacrifice her soul for the sake of the Imamah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Until today, you see hundreds and thousands of people being killed every year in the Hazaras in Iraq and here in Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran. The Shias are persecuted until today. You know who was the first that was persecuted for the sake of Imamah? It was Fatima alayhi salam. It was Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. She became the face of the opposition. Because who would stand in front of Fatima alayhi salam? A lady who should be revered, who should be respected, who should be honored. The door of Fatima was the door that Rasulullah used to stand in front of. And he used to say, Babu Fatima Babi wa hijabuha hijabi. The door of Fatima is my door. And the hijab of Fatima is my hijab. Rasulullah did not bring out his wives. He brought out Fatima. In the verse of purification, إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. That was Fatima, and it was not the wives of the Prophet. Fatima was a part of the Ahl al-Bayt. Fatima, Allah tells the Prophet to tell the Muslims to show love and respect to Fatima. قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. However, what did the Muslims do with Fatima? How did the Muslims treat Fatima alayhi salam? As soon as the Prophet died, they went to the Saqifa, turning against the teaching and the principles that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa had in place. And then they take the land of Fadak from Fatima alayhi salam, and then they attack the house of Fatima. The house of Fatima. This was a house that the angels would seek permission before they enter. Jibreel would seek permission. Rasulullah would seek permission. They say, Sulaim, the companion of Rasulullah, he asks Salman, قال سليم قلت يا سلمان هل دخلوا ولم يكن استئذانوا? Did they enter? Did they barge into the house without seeking permission? فقال إي وعزة الجبار وليس على الزهراء من خماري لكنها لاذت وراء الباب رعاية للستر والحجاب فمذ رأوها عصروها عثرة كادت بنفسي أن تموت حسبة. Yes, he says, for the sake of hijab, she went by the door, behind the door. And there, when that man felt her, he pushed on the door to silence the opposition. Because as long as Fatima was around, she was going to speak in defense of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And that was not going to work for them. That was not going to work. Anytime she speaks, she would shake establishment. Zahra did not remain quiet. She didn't say, I'm a girl, I'm a lady, I should stay at home. No. Zahra, she was going from house to house of the Muhajirin and the Ansar, reminding them of the Bay'ah. And then she gave the sermon of Fadak. And then she delivered a sermon in front of the Muhajirin and the Ansar. In front of the wives of the Muhajirin and the Ansar when they came to visit her when she was sick. And she tells them, وَمَا نَقِمُوا مِنْ أَبِي الْحَسَنِ. What did they have against Abu al-Hasan? وَاللَّهِ مِنْهُ نَكِيرَ سَيْفِهِ وَشَدَّةَ وَطْأَتِهِ وَنَكَالَ وَقْعَتِهِ وَتَنَمُّرَهُ فِي ذَاتِ اللَّهِ. You know why they didn't like Abu al-Hasan? They didn't like him because of his sword. They didn't like him because he was the strong sword of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. They didn't like him because Quraysh had members of their families killed by the sword of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib stood with the truth. And that's why they didn't like Ali. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she was silenced. They tried to silence her. They took away Fadak from her so that her and Amir al-Mu'mineen don't have money. Because Fadak used to produce 40,000 dinars worth of money every year. At that time, you could buy one sheep with 1 dinar. So imagine 40,000 dinars. They took that away. They took the Khilafah from Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they even told her, no crying for you. Have you seen an oppressive establishment that says you cannot even cry? Why? Because when Fatima cries, that was her method of protest. And they didn't like that. They get uncomfortable. Just like today, there are some, when we cry for Imam al-Hussein, when we cry for Fatima, they say, no, don't cry for Fatima. Don't cry for Imam al-Hussein. It makes them uncomfortable. But we will continue to remember the Ahlul Bayt. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she remained her last days. She became ill. She became frail. لما قبض رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله ونال فاطمة عليها السلام من القوم ما نالها لزمت الفراش. After the death of Rasulullah and after what they did, she remained bedridden. لزمت الفراش ونحل جسمها, and her body became so frail and weak. وذاب لحمها, and her flesh was gone. She became so skinny. وجف جلدها على عظمها وصارت كالخيال. The Imam says she became like a shadow. She became so weak. She became so frail. She became like a shadow. And then she would go on Fridays. She would tell her helper, let me know when it's time for sunset. And then they would tell her, and then she would go and do dua. The last hours of the Friday are the moments of dua. This is why we recite dua istamat. In that moment, she would raise her hand in dua, and she would say, Ilahi ajjal wafati sari'a وألحقني بأبي رسول الله فلقد سئمت الحياة يا غياث المستغيثين. she would raise her hand and say, "Oh Allah, end my life. These people, they have not respected me. I am the daughter of your prophet. Take me with with my father, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi." She would ask Allah to leave this life. Imagine how difficult they made the life of Fatima to be, that she would ask and she would pray to leave this life. She would say, صبت علي مصائب لو أنها صبت على الأيام صرنا لياليا. Catastrophes and calamities have fallen upon me, that if they were to fall on days, they would turn that day into night. After she became very frail, very ill, in her last moments, in her last hours, Amir al-Mu'mineen was with her. She tells him, Yabna al-Am, oh my dear husband, I have some things to tell you. I have some things in my heart that I want to tell you during these last moments. They send the kids with the relatives outside the house. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he puts her head in his lap and he begins to cry. They both begin to cry for a while. And then he tells her, go ahead, oh Fatima, tell me what you have, what you want to tell me. She tells him, يا ابن العام ما عهدتني كاذبة ولا خائنة ولا خالفتك منذ عاشرتني. I never lied to you. I never did anything to hurt you. Now I want something to ask you. He tells her, معاذ الله أنت أعلم بالله وأبر وأتقى وأكرم وأشد خوفا من الله من أوبخك بمخالفتي. He tells her, no, Fatima, you have never done anything. And these moments, this is something that is breaking my heart. والله جددت علي مصيبة رسول الله. Your death is reminding me of the death of Rasulullah. I used to look at you and remember Rasulullah. وقد عظمت وفاتك وفقدك فإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Your loss is so great, وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. And then she tells him, أوصيك أولا أن تتزوج بعدي بابنة أختي أماما فإنها تكون لولدي مثلي. I ask you, oh Ali, to marry my niece after me, because she will take care of my children, Hassan and Hussein, Zainab and Kulthum. And give her time, but also don't forget Hassan and Hussein and the children. واجعل لها يوما وليلة واجعل لأولادي يوما وليلة. يا أبا الحسن ولا تصح في وجههما فإنهما يصبحان يتيمين غريبين منكسرين فإنهما بالأمس فقدا جدهما واليوم يفقدان أمهما. Oh أبا الحسن, please be careful. Do not yell at my children, because they had lost their grandfather yesterday and today they are losing their mother. So their hearts cannot handle that. And then she tells him, oh Ali, I don't want anyone to participate in my funeral. أوصيك أن لا يشهد أحدا جنازتي من هؤلاء الذين ظلموني وأخذوا حقي فإنهم عدوي وعدو رسول الله. They are my enemy and the enemy of Rasulullah, and I don't want any of them to participate in my funeral. And then she tells him, oh Ali, I want you to bury me in the middle of the night once the eyes are asleep and people are in the home. And finally, وتعهد قبري بقراءة القرآن. فإن الميت يأنس إذا حضر عنده أهله. And recite Quran over my grave, because the deceased enjoy it when their relatives recite Quran for them. Amir al-Mu'mineen left the house. Fatima al-Zahra remained with Asma bint Umays. She tells her, "Oh Asma, I have prepared my food for my children. I'm going to go in my room. I'm going to recite the Quran." Asma says, Fatima alayha salam, she went in the room. She was reciting the Quran. Then it became time to pray. So I go and I see that Fatima is not answering. I say that she is sleeping. I wait a while and then I go in. I see that Fatima alayha salam has left this life. I call her, Ya bint Rasulillah, Ya Fatima, but there was no answer. A while later, Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, they came. They came. I go to them. I tell them, your mother has prepared food for you. Come and eat from this food. They tell her, oh Asma, when have you seen us eat without our mother Fatima? So they felt something. They go in the room. They see that their mother has passed away. They throw themselves on the body of their mother. They begin to cry. Asma tells them, oh sons of Rasulullah, go and tell your father what has happened. They run to the masjid. They're crying. They come to them. They tell them, oh sons of Rasulullah, why are you crying? Did you remember the death of your grandfather Rasulullah? They say, لا وليس قد ماتت أمنا فاطمة. Our young mother passed away. Our mother left this life. They say that when Amir al-Mu'mineen heard, he began to run towards the house. He begins to fall. And then he begins to say, نفسي على زفراتها محبوسة. يا ليتها خرجت مع الزفرات. لا خير بعدك في الحياة. وإنما أبكي مخافة أن تطول حياتي. That night, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Muslims, they gather around the house of Fatima. They're waiting for the procession. They're waiting to bury Fatima. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells Abu Dhar, go and tell them the funeral of Fatima has been delayed. Go to your homes. That night, once everyone goes to their homes, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he got up in the middle of the night to wash the body of Fatima alayha salam. Asma says Ali ibn Abi Talib, he was washing while I was pouring the water, and Imam al-Hassan had a branch lit on fire. He says as he was washing the body of Fatima alayha salam, suddenly I saw him. He goes to the corner of the room and he begins to cry. I tell him, Ya Abul Hassan, what has happened? What has made you cry? He tells her, Ya Asma, لقد رأيت ضلعا من أضلاعها مكسورا. Oh Asma, as I was washing the body of Fatima, I saw that one of her ribs was broken. This was something that she had not informed me. Then that night, 5 of the Muslims, several, a handful, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, Ammar, Salman, Al-Miqdad, these individuals, they gather and they bury Fatima in that hidden grave. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. العلي العظيم إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات، إنك مجيب الدعوات، إنك غافر الخطيئات، إنك على كل شيء قدير. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نهدي ثواب الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you, Sayed, for enlightening us with those words of wisdom. We would like to transition now to the recitation of some poetry in Farsi by Sayed Ashmatullah. So whenever you're ready, thank you.
دشت کربلا بنگر شافی قیامت را بی سر از جفا بنگر شافی قیامت را بی سر از جفا بنگر فاطمه بیای امشب دشت کربلا بنگر شمر به حیا از کین پا نهاده بر صدرش شمر به حیا از کین پا نهاده بر صدرش جا گرفت زبر روی عرش کبریا بنگر جا گرفت بر روی عرش کبریا بنگر فاطمه بیا امشب دشت کربلا بنگر حنجری که دایم بود با سگای پیغمبر حنجری که دایم بود با سگای پیغمبر جای خنجر شمری کوثر دغا بنگر فاطمه بیای امشب دشت کربلا بنگر از پی علم دارش کن تحفظ ای زهرا از پی علم دارش کن تحفظ ای زهرا هر دو دست او مقدو پیکرش جدا بنگر فاطمه بیا امشب دشت کربلا بنگر یک دم از وفا زهرا کن نظر تو بر لیلا یک دم از وفا زهرا کن نظر تو بر لیلا خاک غم بسر ایران گشت در عذاب بنگر فاطمه بیا امشب دشت کربلا بنگر از برای قاسم هم اجلگا و پا گردد شد عروسی ماتم خون یک کفه حنا بنگر فاطمه بیا امشب دشت کربلا بنگر فاطمه بیا امشب دشت کربلا بنگر بر خاتم انبیاء محمد مصطفی صلوات.
Thank you for that beautiful recitation, Said Ashma. We will now be transitioning to the Q&A section of today's program. If you are interested in asking the Sayyid any of your questions, please be reminded that we'll be exclusively on Zoom. So if you are watching on YouTube and would like to participate, please join through the Zoom link, which I believe is listed on the Ashid website. So thank you again so much all for tuning in, and we will be shortly transitioning to the question and answer section of tonight's program.